Welcome to part 2. In the previous video we showed you how to change the primary and the secondary fuel filters. In this video we're going to show you how to bleed the fuel system. So we need to start by turning the fuel back on after turning it off to change the filters. First stage is to fill the primary fuel filters with fuel. Now we did that on these fuel filters before we fitted them simply because they are higher than the fuel tank, so we can't use gravity. If you can use gravity, the way to do it is to loosen the bleed valve, which will be on top of the fuel filter. With the fuel turned on, as soon as you open that, they're going to start filling, and as soon as it starts bubbling out the top, you can just close the bleed valve. That fills them for you. On these ones, you don't actually have a fuel bleed valve, so what we'd probably have to do is just, if they were below the fuel filter, we could just crack them open slightly, let a bit of air in, they will fill, and as soon as you start seeing fuel coming out the top, you just tighten them up again. That's another way of doing it. What we need to do now is to bleed the secondary filter. We do that by loosening the bleed valve on the top, just a couple of turns, so it's loose, and then activating the lift pump, which is usually alongside it. Now if you can't get full travel on this pump handle, it might be because the cam behind it is stopping it, and what you might need to do then is take a big socket of the right size or a spanner, you put it on the nut on the end of the crankshaft, just give it a quarter of a turn like that, and that should reposition the cam and allow full travel on the lift pump. We keep pumping until we see some diesel, clear diesel without any air bubbles in coming out of the bleed valve at the top. It might take some time. Once we stop getting air bubbles out of there, which we have now, we can just nip that up tight, and that's the secondary filter bled. That's usually enough now to get the engine running, but if you find you are still having trouble, there are a few more things that you can try. Firstly, some engines will have a bleed valve, or maybe even two, on the injector pump itself, so you need to find those, slacken them off, activate the lift pump a few more times until you get clean fuel coming out, tighten it up again, and that's job done. If you're still having problems getting the engine running after you've bled the diesel pump, you're going to need to look at doing some work on the high pressure side. Now many modern engines are self-bleeding, so you shouldn't have to touch the high pressure side. It'll just be a case of cranking the engine over until the engine fires. But if you do need to do some work on it, what you're going to be looking at is slackening off the nuts on the injectors. So with a suitable size spanner, you need to just slacken off the injector nut, just a turn or so it's a bit loose. Then you're going to have to get somebody else to be ready on the ignition key, and they'll just start turning the engine over, and what you'll get is you'll get some air and some fuel coming out here. Once the bubbles stop and you get a nice flow of fuel without any air in, you just nip it back down again before moving on to the next one. What will happen is, probably before you get to the last one, the engine will actually fire itself, but you may need to do all 4 or 6 or how many you've got, but it's just the same procedure for each. Slacken it off, get somebody on the ignition key to fire the engine up a few times until you get some fresh fuel out of there, and tighten it back up again. A word of warning, if you have a common rail diesel engine, you don't really want to be slackening the injectors off. There's a huge amount of pressure behind them, and the procedure isn't required for common rail diesels anyway. Well, I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.